Right now, tech investors are pouring just billions into artificial intelligence, right? Like AI that can write complex code, draft legal briefs, and even drive cars.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And if you look at the financial news,
Yeah.
it really feels like the entire market is just obsessively hunting for the next big automated solution.
Right.
But, what if the ultimate way to future-proof a business in an AI-dominated world isn't actually about building a better machine?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it?
Exactly. What if it's about monopolizing the one thing an algorithm will never, ever be able to do? Like, look a struggling child in the eye and teach them how to be resilient.
I mean, it is a phenomenal pivot when you really think about it. Taking what educational psychologists call non-cognitive skills.
Right, the soft skills.
Yeah, things like leadership, empathy, sportsmanship, the ability to bounce back from failure, and then actually structuring them into a highly profitable, scalable corporate infrastructure.
And that, right there, is the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring a truly fascinating corporate transformation happening right now in Japan.
It's a really unique case study.
It is. We have a huge stack of sources here for you. We're pulling from the Q4 2025 earnings report, various financial tables, and some recent press releases from a company called Leifras Co, Ltd.
Yeah, they trade under the ticker LFS for anyone looking them up.
LFS, right.
Yeah.
So on paper, they are a sports and social business company. But in reality, they're positioning themselves at the exact intersection of a massive national policy shift and the AI revolution.
And they are doing it by actively turning human connection into a premium product, which is wild.
It really is, because, when you dig into their source material, Lifers isn't just surviving this wave of automation. They're actively utilizing it to clear the administrative tech.
Right, so their human workforce can focus entirely on emotional intelligence.
Exactly. It's a blueprint that goes way beyond just sports education. It's a fundamental rethinking of where human value actually lies in the 21st century.
Totally. And to really understand how Liferis is pulling this off, we have to start by looking at the financial scoreboard.
We do, because there is this very specific, almost counterintuitive anomaly in their Q4 2025 numbers, and it completely exposes their entire long-term strategy.
It's hidden right there in plain sight.
Right. So let's look at the top-line numbers first, which, by the way, were stellar. Fiscal year 2025 was a record high. Net revenue hit $74.8 million, which is up 13.5% year over year.
And the underlying profitability metrics were even stronger than that. I mean, their adjusted operating income.
And that's the metric that strips out the one-time accounting noise, right?
Exactly. It shows how the core business is actually performing. That adjusted operating income skyrocketed 41.8% to $4.4 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And they have two main segments driving this scale. First, you have their foundational sports school business.
Right, the core operation.
Yeah, serving over 70,600 members, and that makes up about 70% of their sales. And then you have this other rapidly growing social business.
The school club activities.
Right, handling school clubs. It makes up roughly 30% of sales right now, but it's growing at a massive 32.8% clip.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the top line is growing, the core operating profitability is exploding by nearly 42%. But here's that anomaly I mentioned.
Yeah, the bottom line.
Right. Despite that massive jump in operating income, their actual net income the final bottom line on the income statement, it only crawled up 4.7% to $2.8 million.
Which looks really strange at first glance.
It does. It's the corporate equivalent of getting a massive promotion at work, taking on a ton of new high-profile responsibilities, and then realizing your actual take-home pay barely changed at the end of the month.
Right, you're doing all this extra work for a tiny bump in pay.
Exactly. I'm assuming that massive gap between operating income and net income wasn't just some accounting accident.
No, not at all. The management team made a highly calculated strategic sacrifice here. They actively traded short-term, explosive net income for long-term dominance.
Okay, how so?
Well, some of the drag on that net income was purely technical, They absorbed one-time financing costs to secure a massive syndicated loan for future acquisitions.
Right, got to spend money to get money.
Exactly. And they also saw their historical tax benefits normalize, meaning they are now paying a more standard tax rate, which obviously artificially flattens the appearance of their bottom line growth.
Makes sense. But that can't be the whole story.
It's not. The real story behind that suppressed net income is how they redeployed their human resources.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that in the earnings call transcript. They intentionally suppressed the rollout of new sports schools. Like, they hit pause on opening the very schools that make up their highly profitable core business.
Yes, they took their absolute best, most experienced staff and completely reallocated them to take over stalled, large-scale government projects.
Really, just send them straight into the public sector.
Yep. They swooped into major municipal areas like Nagoya City, Suda City, and Shibuya Ward. I mean, in Nagoya alone, they stepped in to take over operations in 6 entire
The
wards
6 wards, why were they stalled in the first place?
because the previous operators literally went bankrupt and just abandoned the contracts.
Oh, wow. So instead of chasing easy, high-margin revenue by, opening a new soccer school in a wealthy suburb somewhere, they threw their top-tier talent into the middle of a bureaucratic nightmare.
Exactly. To clean up messes left by bankrupt competitors.
That has to be incredibly expensive in the short term, which totally explains the hit to the net income. I mean, they essentially acted as a bailout mechanism for these local governments.
That's exactly what they did. And by absorbing those higher short-term costs and prioritizing massive public sector projects, they made themselves structurally indispensable.
Because they solved a massive headache for the city.
Right. They proved they could handle massive scale under pressure and rescue local politicians from the public relations disaster of failing after-school programs.
That strategic patience makes a lot more sense when you realize what's actually happening in Japan in 2026. Because they aren't acting like a public utility out of the goodness of their hearts, right?
Definitely not.
They are positioning themselves for a historic national policy reform.
Yes, the 2026 club activity reform. This is the massive demographic and policy tailwind the company is riding right now.
For context, for decades, weekend school club activities in Japan, they've been run almost entirely by public school teachers.
It's just an incredible burden.
Right. Teachers are already overworked grading papers and lesson planning, and then they are expected to coach baseball or manage the brass band all weekend.
And they often don't even have experience in the sport they're coaching.
Yeah, the Japanese government has finally recognized that this model is just completely unsustainable. So starting in 2026, they're transferring 30% of these weekend school club activities away from teachers.
Handing them over to private organizations and local communities.
And we are talking about over 38,000 individual clubs across 9,800 schools nationwide.
It's a massive shift. The financial reports estimate this creates an overnight total addressable market, a TAM of $3.19 billion.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine the government suddenly deciding to privatize a massive chunk of the public education system, right?
Right.
And they hand you the keys because you are literally the only one with the infrastructure to actually run it.
Because right now, Leifras captures an incredibly tiny fraction of this market.
Yeah, I think the report said about $20,000 in sales relative to that $3.19 billion TAM.
Exactly. Yet they are already the undisputed industry leader. They manage 381 schools in this specific segment, and they boast an 89% repeat rate with local governments.
89% is insane for public contracts.
It is, and the sheer scale of that overnight market opening usually attracts massive corporate conglomerates. You'd normally expect major holding companies to swoop in and try to capture that $3 billion pie.
But they can't.
No, because Leifras has spent years quietly building structural barriers to entry, moats that are incredibly difficult for a new entrant to replicate, no matter how much capital they have.
Because, I mean, if you are a local mayor or a school board, you are not going to hand over the physical and emotional care of hundreds of children to a brand new tech startup.
Or a faceless conglomerate just because they offer a lower bid.
Right. You're going to look for institutional trust and safety.
And safety is the ultimate barrier to entry here. Leifras has maintained a spotless safety record. 0 serious accidents or injuries since taking over these public contracts in 2013.
0. Since 2013.
0. They achieve that through rigorous, standardized training and constant safety patrols. So when a municipality is evaluating bids for 2026, a 13-year streak of 0 serious accidents is basically an unbeatable metric.
Wow. The sources also point out their entrenched network with the government itself. Like, they are an official partner of the Japan Sport Association, they have direct contracts with the Japan Sports Agency, and they've collaborated with 33 different prefectures.
They are deeply embedded.
But what really stood out to me was the financial sacrifice they made to secure that trust. The report notes that Leifras literally forfeited lucrative contracts with certain local governments.
Yes, specifically to avoid any potential conflicts of interest while acting as a partner to the National Japan Sports Agency.
That's a huge move. They chose to walk away from guaranteed revenue just to prove they were a trusted partner in jointly promoting national policy.
Right, rather than just being viewed as a private vendor trying to extract every available dollar, you simply cannot buy that level of institutional trust.
No, it requires years of spotless, conflict-free behavior to earn a seat at the rulemaking table.
Exactly.
Okay, so they have the institutional trust, they have a massive $3.19 billion market opening up, and they have an impenetrable safety record. But let's look at the logistical reality of this for a second.
The operations side.
Yeah. Operating 38,000 potential clubs requires an absolute army of human beings. To manage this scale today, they employ 1,055 full-time employees and 3,544 part-time instructors spread across 45 prefectures.
And their product isn't just, teaching a kid the rules of a sport.
Right. The core philosophy is what makes their workforce so specialized.
Yeah.
Their mandate actively rejects the traditional Japanese physical education model.
Which historically relied heavily on sheer willpower, intense discipline, and sometimes physical punishment.
Yeah. Leifras' entire brand is built on acknowledging, praising, encouraging, and motivating children.
It's a completely different approach.
But I want to push back on the scalability of that model for a second.
Okay, but go for it.
If your brand promise is human empathy-like, if you are guaranteeing that an instructor will offer warm words of encouragement to a child with developmental differences or teach complex abstract concepts like teamwork and sportsmanship,
Right.
how in the world do you maintain quality control over 4,500 different instructors? Human beings are messy. They have bad days. They get tired.
That's very true.
You can't force an exhausted 22-year-old part-time coach to be deeply empathetic just by putting it in a corporate handbook. I mean, empathy doesn't scale like a software update.
You're hitting on what is arguably the hardest operational puzzle to solve in a service business. And to prove to parents and schools that they are actually delivering those abstract concepts consistently, Leifras developed a proprietary system called Milabo.
Milabo.
Yeah. They built it in collaboration with sports psychology experts, and its entire purpose is to visualize and track the growth of non-cognitive skills in children.
So they basically created a standardized feedback loop. By establishing specific rubrics and situational milestones, they take an abstract concept like resilience and turn it into measurable data.
Measurable data that a parent can actually see on a screen. The parent can track their child's emotional and social progress over a 6-month soccer season, not just their athletic ability.
That is fascinating. So it forces the instructor to actively engage with the emotional development of the child rather than just running drills.
Exactly. But to your point about instructor burnout, the management team understands that you cannot demand peak emotional performance from humans if they are buried in administrative paperwork. And this is where their highly specific AI strategy comes into play.
See, I was wondering how AI fits into a business based on human connection. Because I'm assuming they aren't using generative AI to write pep talks for the kids, right?
No, definitely not.
Are they using the technology to clear bottlenecks so the humans actually have the bandwidth to care?
That is the absolute core of their hybrid strategy. Management explicitly detailed how they use artificial intelligence and automation to run the back office.
Which has to be a massive job.
Oh, think about the nightmare of managing the schedules, payroll, compliance, and background checks for 3,500 part-time workers across 45 prefectures.
It's a logistical nightmare.
They are processing roughly 1,000 hiring and termination cases every single month. So by automating that massive logistical burden, they remove the friction from the system entirely.
So the AI handles the paperwork, so the human can handle the people work. I mean, if an instructor doesn't have to spend 3 hours fighting with a scheduling app or filling out redundant HR forms, they actually have the energy to look a kid in the eye and be genuinely present.
They've recognized that routine administrative tasks are cheap to automate, but genuine human connection is a premium, high-margin product.
And how do they make sure they never run out of that premium product?
Well, they're treating talent supply like national infrastructure. A recent press release details a comprehensive partnership agreement they just signed with Sanko Gakuen.
Right, and Sanko Gakuen is a massive educational conglomerate. They operate over 60 vocational schools, universities, and junior colleges across a dozen cities in Japan.
By partnering directly with them, Leifras is creating a continuous, highly trained pipeline of next-generation sports business personnel.
So they aren't just, like, putting up job listings on a website and hoping for the best.
No, they are essentially building the factory that trains instructors in their specific empathy-driven model before they even graduate. Combined with their internal talent bank system that secures active teachers for side jobs, they have built an industrialized supply chain for human empathy.
So if an instructor is sick, the system instantly dispatches a fully trained replacement who shares the exact same coaching philosophy.
Yep, completely seamless.
It's remarkable. They've taken the most unpredictable variable in business human emotion and built an industrialized, highly reliable system around it.
It's a brilliant model.
But, having engineered this perfect blueprint for domestic operations, the final piece of the puzzle we found in the source material is how they plan to export this model globally.
Because they aren't stopping at Japan.
No, and they are building a massive financial war chest to do it.
The financial engineering here is honestly just as strategic as their human resources policy. They are preparing for a significant structural shift in the public markets right now.
Let's break down those market moves, because Leifras is already listed on the Nasdaq in the U.S. And according to the earnings report, they executed a 1-to-20 share split in late 2024. For anyone unfamiliar, a reverse share split basically consolidates the number of existing shares, which proportionally increases the price of each individual share.
Yeah, you do this so your stock doesn't trade like a highly volatile penny stock.
Right, which makes it much more palatable for serious institutional investors to actually buy in.
Exactly.
But while they are optimizing the U.S. listing, they are also aggressively pursuing a dual listing on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the TSE.
Which is no small feat.
No.
Yeah.
So why go through the massive legal and regulatory headache of listing on two entirely different exchanges?
It all comes back to that concept of institutional trust. The Nasdaq listing provides fantastic visibility for global expansion, and it gives them access to massive pools of capital.
Sure.
But their core foundational business relies on handling Japan's national sports infrastructure. By achieving a listing on the TSE, they proved their absolute governance and credibility as a highly public entity within Japan.
It acts as a stamp of approval.
Right. It makes it significantly easier for a local mayor or a conservative school board to confidently sign a multi-million-dollar contract with them.
It's a massive flex. It tells domestic politicians, hey, we are a fully vetted pillar of the Japanese economy.
Yes. And meanwhile, they're using their financial position to stockpile cash. They recently secured a $16 million syndicated loan.
And just to clarify, a syndicated loan involves multiple different banks pooling their money together to fund a single borrower. You usually see this when a company is planning something so large that a single bank doesn't want to carry all the risk themselves.
Exactly. Add that $16 million to the roughly $3.0 million they are already generating in operating cash flow, and they have serious liquidity right now.
And the guidance for FY 2026 projects strong double-digit growth, aiming for anywhere between $82.9 million to $95.7 million in revenue.
They are explicitly telling the market that they are transitioning from a strategic growth investment phase, where they were sacrificing net income to clean up government contracts, into a full-fledged margin expansion phase.
They have the dry powder ready for global moves.
They absolutely do.
But those global ambitions face a pretty serious historical hurdle. Looking closely at the Q&A section of the earnings call transcript, an analyst asked a very pointed, skeptical question.
I remember that part.
Yeah, apparently, Leifras tried to expand into Asia about 10 years ago, and it was a massive failure. Like, they had to completely withdraw from the market.
Yeah, it did not go well.
So if human empathy is such a universal product, why did it fail? And why should investors believe this time will be any different?
Well, the CEO, Mr. Ito, was incredibly transparent about that past failure. He admitted that the withdrawal a decade ago was driven by a lack of creditworthiness, insufficient financial resources, and severe cultural clashes on the ground.
They tried to build entirely from scratch in foreign cultures without the capital to weather the initial storms.
That's the trap. And that is precisely why the Nasdaq listing and that $16 million syndicated loan are so crucial today. They aren't starting from zero this time. Their entire global strategy has shifted from an organic, ground-up rollout to disciplined mergers and acquisitions.
So they're taking that syndicated loan and going shopping.
Exactly. They're targeting existing successful sports schools, fitness clubs, and education companies in highly developed markets, specifically Asia, Europe, and the Americas.
So not starting from scratch.
Right. They're looking for markets that already possess a mature sports culture, but currently lack a systematic, data-driven approach to developing non-cognitive skills.
Okay, think about the mechanics of that. If you buy a successful, well-loved local soccer academy in Europe, you completely bypass the cultural clash problem.
Yep.
You aren't forcing a Japanese business model onto a European town. You buy the existing trusted local infrastructure, you keep the local coaches, and then you just inject your proprietary Malabo software into their backend.
You introduce a proven methodology for tracking and visualizing leadership and teamwork.
Instantly, you create premium added value for that local business without having to reinvent the wheel culturally.
It's so smart. It allows them to instantly charge a premium for an existing service. But I will say, management is highly aware of the dangers of post-merger integration, or PMI.
Right, PMI, that is the incredibly delicate process of actually combining two companies after the ink dries on the contract.
And it's where most M&A strategies completely fail.
Yeah, cultures clash, systems don't talk to each other.
Right, so they explicitly stated they will not pursue scale just for the sake of getting bigger. They are only targeting partners whose foundational values already align with their core philosophy.
Meaning organizations that already avoid physical punishment and focus on encouragement.
Exactly. If the foundational ethics align, integrating the software and the administrative AI becomes a smooth operational upgrade, not a culture war.
Wow. When you step back and look at the entire architecture we've unpacked from these earnings reports and press releases, Leifras isn't just a sports education company.
No, they really aren't.
They are a masterclass in how to perfectly position a business at the exact intersection of demographic reality and technological advancement.
They inherited a $3.19 billion market almost overnight because they were the only ones who spent a decade proving they could be trusted with it.
Right.
And they are monetizing that market by intelligently dividing labor, letting algorithms handle the massive logistical nightmare of employing 4,500 people.
So those human beings can dedicate 100% of their energy to emotional care.
Exactly.
They've turned human empathy into a scalable, highly profitable, and globally exportable product.
Oh.
Which, leaves you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own long after we wrap up this deep dive.
Oh, for sure.
If non-cognitive skills like abstract human traits like resilience, teamwork, sportsmanship, and empathy, if they can be successfully systemized, tracked by software like Malabo, and sold as a premium educational product globally,
Yeah.
what other inherently human traits will become luxury commodities in the coming decades?
That is a fascinating question.
Right. As AI and algorithms inevitably take over everything from coding software to writing legal contracts, will we soon see major corporations buying up empathy startups or creativity agencies just to differentiate themselves in an entirely automated world?
It really forces you to completely reevaluate the future of the human workforce.
It is something you really have to wonder about as you watch this market evolve. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.